Sarah Martinez had been working as a communications specialist at Fort Henderson for 3 years. She knew every corner of the massive military installation, from the underground bunkers to the towering command centers. What she didn't know was that her life was about to change forever on a cold Tuesday morning in November. The day started like any other. Sarah arrived at 0600 hours, her security badge clipped to her navy blue uniform. She grabbed her usual coffee from the mess hall and made her way to Building C, where the communications department operated around the clock. The building was a maze of corridors and stairwells, designed more for function than comfort. As Sarah climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, she noticed something odd. 2 men in civilian clothes were having an intense conversation near the top of the stairwell. She recognized one of them as Colonel Williams from the Intelligence Division. But the other man was unfamiliar. He wore an expensive suit and carried himself with the confidence of someone used to giving orders. Sarah tried to walk past them quietly, but the stranger's voice stopped her in her tracks. He was talking about classified satellite communications, mentioning code names she had only heard whispered in the highest security briefings. Her training kicked in immediately. As a communications specialist, she was required to report any security breaches or unauthorized disclosure of classified information. She pretended to check her phone while listening carefully. The stranger was detailing specific mission coordinates and troop movements that were supposed to be known only to a handful of top-level commanders. Colonel Williams seemed nervous, constantly looking around to make sure they weren't being overheard. But he had missed Sarah, who was positioned just around the corner on the landing below. The conversation continued for several minutes. Sarah learned that the stranger represented a foreign intelligence service and was paying substantial amounts for the information. Colonel Williams was passing along details about upcoming military operations, including the locations of special forces units and the timing of sensitive missions. Sarah's heart raced as she realized the magnitude of what she was witnessing. This wasn't just a minor security violation. This was treason at the highest level, involving information that could get soldiers killed and compromise national security. She knew she had to act quickly, but she also understood the danger she was in. As quietly as possible, Sarah activated the recording function on her secure military phone. The device was designed to capture audio even in challenging environments, and she managed to record several minutes of the conversation before the men began to move. The stranger handed Colonel Williams a thick envelope, which the colonel quickly tucked inside his jacket. Sarah pressed herself against the wall as they prepared to leave, hoping they would go in opposite directions, but her luck ran out. As Colonel Williams descended the stairs, he spotted Sarah on the landing below. For a moment, their eyes met, and Sarah saw the immediate recognition and fear in his expression. He knew that she had been there long enough to overhear the conversation. Sarah tried to act natural, pretending to be engrossed in her phone, but it was too late. Colonel Williams whispered something to the stranger, who looked down at Sarah with cold, calculating eyes. They both knew that she represented a serious threat to their operation. Without saying a word, Colonel Williams continued down the stairs, but Sarah could feel the stranger's gaze following her. She tried to continue to her office as if nothing had happened, but her hands were shaking as she swiped her badge at the security checkpoint. Throughout the morning, Sarah struggled to concentrate on her work. She kept replaying the conversation in her mind, trying to decide what to do with the information she had gathered. The recording on her phone contained enough evidence to expose the entire conspiracy, but she also knew that going up against a colonel would require careful planning and ironclad proof. During her lunch break, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She decided to make copies of the recording and hide them in different locations. She also began documenting everything she remembered from the conversation, including dates, times, and specific details about the classified information that had been discussed. As she worked on her documentation, Sarah noticed that she was being watched. The same stranger from the stairwell was now sitting in the mess hall, pretending to read a newspaper while keeping an eye on her table. She realized that they were already taking steps to monitor her movements. Sarah finished her lunch quickly and returned to her office. But the feeling of being watched never left her. Throughout the afternoon, She noticed unfamiliar faces in the corridors. People who seemed to have no specific purpose, but were always nearby. She began to understand that she had stumbled into something much bigger and more dangerous than a simple security breach. As her shift ended, Sarah made another crucial decision. She would not go home that evening, as usual. Instead, she would stay late at the office and use the secure military communication systems to contact higher authorities. She knew that once she made that call, there would be no going back. But as Sarah prepared to take action, she had no idea that Colonel Williams and his associates were already planning their response. They had identified her as a threat that needed to be eliminated quickly and quietly. The wheels were already in motion for a confrontation that would rock the entire military base and expose a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of command. Sarah stayed at her desk until well past 8 p.m., long after most of the day shift had gone home. The communications center was nearly empty, except for the skeleton crew that maintained overnight operations. She had spent the past 2 hours preparing a detailed report of everything she had witnessed, complete with timestamps and descriptions of the classified information she had overheard. As she prepared to transmit her report through secure channels to the Inspector General's office, Sarah heard footsteps in the corridor outside. This wasn't unusual during normal hours, but at this time of night, foot traffic was minimal. She listened carefully and realized that multiple people were moving through the building, their steps deliberate and coordinated. Sarah quickly saved her work and locked her computer terminal. Something felt wrong about the situation, and her military training had taught her to trust her instincts. She grabbed her jacket and the backup copies of the recording she had hidden in her desk drawer. The footsteps were getting closer, and Sarah could hear low voices discussing room numbers and locations. She realized they were systematically searching the building, and it didn't sound like a routine security patrol. Moving as quietly as possible, she slipped out of her office and headed toward the back stairwell, the same one where she had witnessed the conversation earlier that day. As Sarah reached the stairwell, she heard her name being called from somewhere behind her. The voice belonged to Colonel Williams, and he was asking the night duty officer about her location. Sarah's heart pounded as she realized they were actively looking for her. She climbed the stairs as quietly as possible, hoping to reach the roof access door. The building's roof had emergency communication equipment that could be used to contact base security directly. But as she reached the 4th-floor landing, Sarah heard multiple sets of footsteps entering the stairwell below her. The voices were clearer now, and Sarah could make out at least 3 different people, including Colonel Williams and the stranger from earlier. They were discussing how to handle the situation quietly and permanently. The words sent a chill down Sarah's spine as she realized they were planning something far more serious than simply trying to silence her. Sarah continued climbing, but the footsteps behind her were getting closer. As she reached the 5th floor, she heard Colonel Williams talking on his radio, coordinating with people positioned at other exits throughout the building. She was being systematically trapped, with no clear way to escape. In desperation, Sarah tried the door to the 5th-floor corridor, hoping to find an alternative route. But as she pushed through the door, she found herself face to face with 2 more men in civilian clothes. They had been waiting for her, positioned to cut off her escape route. One of the men grabbed Sarah's arm and demanded that she hand over her phone and any recordings she might have made. Sarah tried to resist, but she was outnumbered and overpowered. In the struggle that followed, her phone was knocked from her hands and clattered across the floor. As Sarah lunged to retrieve her phone, one of the men pushed her hard against the corridor wall. The impact stunned her momentarily, giving them time to grab the device and check its contents. When they found the recording, their expressions became grim and determined. Colonel Williams appeared in the corridor, breathing heavily from his climb up the stairs. He looked at Sarah with a mixture of anger and regret, as if he knew that the situation had spiraled beyond his control. The stranger was right behind him, and his cold demeanor made it clear that he viewed Sarah as nothing more than a problem to be solved. They forced Sarah back into the stairwell, where the acoustic properties of the concrete walls would muffle any sounds. The stranger took charge of the situation, speaking in clipped, professional tones, as he outlined their options. It was clear that he had experience in handling similar situations. and Sarah realized she was dealing with trained operatives. As they debated what to do with her, Sarah noticed that one of the men was positioning himself at the top of the stairs. The implication was terrifying, but it gave her a sudden burst of desperate energy. She knew that whatever they were planning, she had only moments to act. Sarah suddenly broke free from the grip of the man holding her and lunged toward the emergency alarm system mounted on the stairwell wall. If she could trigger the base-wide alert, it would bring security personnel running and potentially save her life. Her hand was inches from the alarm when someone grabbed her from behind and yanked her backward. In the struggle that followed, Sarah lost her footing on the narrow landing. She felt herself falling, tumbling down the concrete stairs as the men above watched in shock. The fall seemed to last forever. But in reality, it was over in seconds. Sarah hit the landing 2 floors below, with a sickening impact that echoed through the stairwell. She lay motionless at the bottom of the stairs, her body twisted at an unnatural angle. The men above stood frozen for a moment, processing what had just happened. The stranger was the first to react, immediately taking control of the situation. He sent 2 of his men to check on Sarah, while he and Colonel Williams discussed how to handle the aftermath. When the men reached Sarah's unconscious form, they found her pulse was weak, but she was still breathing. The fall had caused serious injuries, but she was alive. This created a new set of problems for the conspirators, who had hoped that the incident would appear to be a tragic accident. The stranger made a quick decision. He ordered his men to call for medical assistance while he and Colonel Williams prepared their story. They would claim that Sarah had been working late and had accidentally fallen down the stairs. The building's security cameras would need to be handled, and any evidence of their presence would have to be eliminated. As the first medics arrived on the scene, the stranger had already begun implementing damage control measures. He contacted his associates throughout the base, activating a network of compromised personnel who could help manage the situation. Within minutes, the narrative was being shaped to present the incident as a simple accident, but the stranger had underestimated the response that would follow. Sarah's fall had triggered automatic security protocols, and the base's top leadership was already being notified of a serious incident involving a communications specialist with high-level security clearance. The investigation that followed would be thorough and intensive, conducted by people who couldn't be easily bought or intimidated. Within 10 minutes of Sarah hitting the stairwell floor, Fort Henderson's emergency response protocols were in full swing. The base commander, General Patricia Hayes, was awakened at her quarters and immediately briefed on the situation. A communications specialist with top-secret clearance had suffered a serious fall, and standard procedure required a comprehensive investigation. General Hayes had not risen through the ranks by ignoring potential security threats. When she learned that Sarah Martinez had been working unusually late hours and had been found in a restricted stairwell, red flags immediately went up. She ordered the base to be sealed, while a full investigation was conducted. The medical team rushed Sarah to the base hospital, where military doctors worked frantically to stabilize her condition. She had suffered a severe head injury, multiple broken ribs, and internal bleeding. As she was wheeled into emergency surgery, Sarah remained unconscious, unable to tell anyone what had really happened in that stairwell. While Sarah fought for her life in the operating room, General Hayes was implementing security measures that would trap the conspirators on the base. She contacted her counterpart, General Marcus Thompson, who commanded the base's intelligence and security operations. Together, they made the decision that would change everything. At 11:47 p.m., both generals arrived at the base's main security center and ordered an immediate lockdown. Every gate was sealed, all communication systems were monitored, and no personnel were allowed to leave without direct authorization from the command structure. The official explanation was that a security incident required immediate investigation, but the real purpose was to prevent anyone from destroying evidence or fleeing the base. General Thompson, a veteran of military intelligence operations, immediately recognized the suspicious circumstances surrounding Sarah's accident. He ordered his teams to secure all security camera footage from the building where the incident occurred, and to begin interviewing everyone who had been in the area that evening. The first break in the case came when security personnel reviewed the camera footage. While most of the cameras in the stairwell area had mysteriously malfunctioned, exterior cameras showed several unidentified vehicles that had entered the base earlier that day. The vehicles were registered to a private security company, but further investigation revealed that the company was a front organization. As the night progressed, General Hayes and General Thompson worked together to piece together a pattern of suspicious activity. Communications logs showed unusual encrypted transmissions from Colonel Williams' office, and financial records revealed irregular payments into accounts associated with several base personnel. At 3 a.m., while Sarah remained in critical condition, the generals made their most crucial decision. They contacted the FBI's Counterintelligence Division and the Department of Defense Inspector General's office. Within hours, federal agents were on their way to Fort Henderson with authority to investigate potential espionage activities. Colonel Williams, unaware that the base had been sealed and that federal investigators were en route, was desperately trying to contact his foreign handler. But the communication blackout meant that all his attempts to reach the outside world were being monitored and recorded by General Thompson's intelligence teams. The stranger who had orchestrated the attack on Sarah was also trapped on the base. Using a false identity and forged credentials, he had planned to leave immediately after dealing with the security threat. Instead, he found himself confined to the base guest quarters, while investigators began systematically checking the background of every visitor and contractor. As dawn broke over Fort Henderson, Sarah's condition began to stabilize. The emergency surgery had been successful, and while she remained unconscious, doctors were optimistic about her chances for recovery. More importantly for the investigation, they confirmed that her injuries were consistent with being pushed down the stairs rather than a simple fall. General Hayes used this medical evidence to justify expanding the investigation. She authorized General Thompson to begin arresting personnel suspected of involvement in espionage activities. The first target was Colonel Williams, who was taken into custody as he attempted to destroy classified documents in his office. The arrest of Colonel Williams triggered a cascade of events that exposed the full scope of the conspiracy. Under interrogation, he revealed the existence of a spy ring that had been operating within the base for over 2 years. The ring had been selling classified information to multiple foreign intelligence services, compromising numerous military operations and putting soldiers' lives at risk. Federal agents arrived at Fort Henderson just as General Thompson's teams were conducting simultaneous raids on the homes and offices of suspected conspirators. The coordination between military and civilian investigators was seamless, resulting in the arrest of 12 base personnel and 5 foreign operatives. The stranger who had orchestrated Sarah's attack was identified as Viktor Petrov, a Russian intelligence operative who had been using multiple false identities to penetrate American military installations. His arrest led to the discovery of similar operations at 3 other military bases, resulting in one of the largest counterintelligence investigations in recent history. Sarah regained consciousness 3 days after her fall, with General Hayes at her bedside. When Sarah was able to speak, she provided crucial testimony that confirmed the investigators' theories about what had happened in the stairwell. The recording on her phone, which had been recovered and analyzed by FBI technical experts, contained enough evidence to prosecute the entire spy ring. The trial that followed made headlines across the country. Colonel Williams was sentenced to life in prison for treason, while Viktor Petrov and his associates received similar sentences. The case exposed serious vulnerabilities in military security procedures and led to comprehensive reforms in how classified information was handled and protected. Sarah Martinez became a hero within the military intelligence community, receiving the Defense Department's highest civilian honor for her courage in exposing the spy ring. Her actions had prevented the compromise of ongoing military operations and potentially saved countless lives. The 2 generals who had made the crucial decision to seal the base, Patricia Hayes and Marcus Thompson, were both promoted and tasked with implementing new security protocols throughout the military. Their quick thinking and decisive action had turned what could have been a successful cover-up into a major victory for American national security. Fort Henderson was eventually reopened after a thorough security review, but the base had been fundamentally changed by the events of that November night. New procedures were implemented to prevent similar infiltrations, and the story of Sarah Martinez's bravery became part of the training curriculum for all military personnel with security clearances. Sarah recovered from her injuries and returned to duty, but she was transferred to a new position in the Pentagon, where her experience and expertise could be used to strengthen counterintelligence operations across all branches of the military. Her fall down that stairwell had been intended to silence her forever, but instead, it had exposed one of the most significant espionage operations in modern American military history.